Commissioner Lottis will catch up when she arrives. And so officially, it being 6 o'clock or thereabouts, I call to order the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. Sherry, could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Quillisi?
Here.
Vice Chair Nolan?
Here.
Commissioner Trent?
Here.
Commissioner Swift?
Here.
Commissioner Lottis yet to join.
Yet to join. Okay. Commissioner Trent, if you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To the
to the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Next on the agenda is public communications. Sherry, Lucas, do we have any written or verbal people waiting in line in a waiting room or something?
No, and James informed me there's nobody as attendees. There's no attendees registered.
Okay. Did we get any email communications?
I've received none.
Received none. Okay. Well, we'll move on then to the consent item, the minutes of the regular meeting. Welcome.
Oh, sorry.
We are moving on to the consent item, the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, January 20th, 2021. Any commissioners have any adds or changes to the minutes? It looked right to me. How about a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Very good.
All right. Make the motion that we accept the Ojai Planning Commission meeting minutes from the January 20th, 2021 meeting.
Second?
I'll second it.
Very good. Thank you, John. Any discussion? If not, Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Quillisi?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes?
Lottis?
Yes.
Trent?
Yes.
Swift?
Terrific. Okay. Next on the agenda, item 2, return to the fabled Title 10.
Thanks for turning my
Public hearing item this time, a review of the draft ordinance. Lucas, would you take us through that, please?
Yeah, sure. So good evening, commissioners. My name is Lucas Seibert, Community Development Manager here with the City of Ojai. The item you have before you tonight is actually a resolution to make a recommendation to City Council with this draft ordinance. That draft ordinance has about 67 sections that this commission has actually looked at. It was in the first meeting in November, and I believe the second meeting in December that we poured through these sections. There is obviously still more sections of errata to go through, but this is what we have put together as staff for preparation for consideration by this planning commission, this body. And then that would obviously go to City Council for their consideration and deliberation as well.
Because it'll be a text amendment. Yeah.
Correct. And this is, yeah, that's correct. This is a text amendment. The resolution is attachment A to this report. And if the commission has any questions regarding these 67 sections, we can take a look at those pieces individually. Remember, this is the foundation of what we're looking for in terms of what'll build the deeper dives that we've been talking about off and on over the past several months. So.
Okay. I sent you some errata earlier in the week.
Yes, I did see those.
Minor corrections to those sections.
Right.
Things like capitalizing or italicizing, stuff like that.
Now,
Just
some of
make
the
it consistent with the current code.
Yeah, and the italicizing. Remember the code writers, when they incorporate it, they'll they'll be making
will.
those,
Oh, okay.
those necessary font changes in organization throughout. So while I do appreciate the finite detail there, when it does get to those code writer and incorporators, they'll be looking for that consistency throughout. But it's good to have it. It makes their job a little bit easier.
Right. Okay, great. Any other suggestions from the commissioners? Yes, Nolan.
I just had a couple simple things. If you go to page 26 of 66, it says businesses support services. And I'm wondering if some of these can be consolidated or not. But if you look at A, E, and N, I don't know if they need, if it could just be consolidated, or do we need to have those separate items? And it's interesting because I still sometimes use the word blueprinting, but they don't make blueprints anymore. Now they're, printing and reproduction, reprographics. So I don't know if we want to update our language there and or consolidate, like I said, A, E, and possibly N. Although some places may only do one of those if you want to keep them separate, but.
Right. Let's just, which page are you on here?
Page 26 of 66. Right at the top of the page where it says 7 business support services. Yeah.
Well, certainly N is included. Is it
In
photocopy?
E.
Yeah. N seems to be included in E, and A seems to be included in E.
Correct. So it could almost be that, and then maybe strike blueprinting and put reprographic services, just because.
The more updated term.
Right.
Yes.
I don't see any issues with that. You're right.
You want to
Blueprinting
make
really
you want to
doesn't-
make A reprographics, or you want to take A out and put reprographics somewhere else?
Because you could just, like Steve was saying, E pretty much encompasses A and N.
Right.
And do you just have the one, or essentially, it could be 2 separate ones, because some places just only do, say, the reprographics. But I'm thinking of, like, say, the Ojai Business Center does copying, quick printing, and reprographics, for instance.
And reprographics, I don't see that word, that specific word in the list here. But what do you mean by it?
I'm using that in as a replacement for blueprinting, because blueprints technically, are not made any longer, mostly because of the chemical issues. And so essentially you're making large
Now,
prints.
couldn't one
just
that
large ink on
Copies.
paper kind of things? Yeah.
the term is
Yeah.
starting to
So-
phase itself out. I agree with that. I don't know that that even in our application I have the requirement for a blueprint. That's not a part of our application when you're submitting plans. I'm not asking for a blueprint. So the term itself, I think, is dated. I mean, it could be as simple as striking it out, but putting in the more up-to-date term. And you're calling it a reprographic. That's the more up-to-date term that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, you can look it up, and if you want to just call it prints or copies, I'm okay. I most of the printing places I actually go to for blueprints are called, they use the term reprographics.
Right.
But I think that's something you may want to look at, and you don't have to make it complicated.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree.
We could very easily take A and N out of the list and use an appropriate word in E and then just renumber those.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was proposing too.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Kathy. I like that.
All right.
Yeah, that is REPRO graphics, Lucas.
Here, let me look at it.
Repo.
Yeah. I mean,
Repro,
once again, you
There's
can
an
look it up.
R in there.
like reproduction.
Repro.
Yeah, repro graphics. And, if that seems too complicated, you could just say printing.
That sound all right to everybody?
If you just do a Google search, you'll see it'll come up It's basically large format reproduction.
I
So
mean, even if
in lieu of.
you were blueprinting, I think that would still come under reprographics.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good replacement.
I do
Yeah,
too.
so would mimeograph if there's actually any one of those machines around.
Xerox machine?
Remember with the old stencil
In
you
that
used to
wheel.
cut and then
The
crank the
purple.
wheel, yep.
Purple print?
So, I mean, I'm aware of those things, so
Are we dating ourselves?
Yeah.
Wow, Lucas. It's pretty ancient.
it's yeah. Well, it's more in my time, but certainly my parents talked about them. So
Yeah.
the
It was in my
reprographic.
time.
The reprographic, I think, is a fine solution. I just want to make sure that it's not. If there's other options out there, I want to have some wiggle room in terms of maybe incorporating something we're getting rid of blueprint because that seems to be phased out as a
Outdated.
term. But
Yeah.
something up to date, reprographic seems to be the number one choice. I haven't
Yeah.
really.
The other option would be like wide format printing. That's another term, wide
Right.
format, like plotter printing or something like that. I mean, there's all kinds of.
See, and that one I'm a little bit more familiar with. Anytime I'm talking to somebody about submitting a set of plans or details of a project, they're always asking, is it 11 by 17? Is it a full set? And the full set's 24 by 36. So we're not
Perfect.
talking about a specific term. We're actually just describing what really is the term of what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
That's
But it's
really
wide format.
reprographics because you're reproducing what was on the computer screen on paper. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But go ahead and look it up. And
And
I-
Lucas, it may
Yeah.
make sense also, if we're talking about different types, sometimes with code construction, it's best to use a broad, vague term and define it as we define it. So doing a catch-all, say specialized printing services, which covers anything.
there you go.
Okay,
And that way
Sure.
we get to interpret that term as we so choose. And
Yeah.
we can make it as broad and, and that'll be sort of the catch-all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah. I could go for that.
works for me.
All right.
Um,
So
Yeah.
it sounds like we're in agreement of a broad term, but it's blueprinting is obsolete.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I had a question on that same page, Lucas. Item currently called item L, other heavy service business services. I don't know what the
Heavy-
originators of this
Yeah.
section back in, Lord knows,
2004, I think.
2004. Not sure what was meant by that, so
That may also be a previous lawyer telling them that that's a broad catch-all term to define things as they choose.
What does that
Okay.
mean? Heavy?
I don't
even
know what that means.
A heavy
it-
service is.
I mean,
Heavy, or is it just?
that's somebody with a
Waiting.
crane.
that's what worries me.
Heavy service business services. Yeah.
If it doesn't fall within the other categories, I'd say take it out, but
That's
Wait,
maybe
do
it's
we have a
somebody with a
definition for
forklift.
Yeah. Wait, let's see.
Heavy services is in quotation marks, so there may be a
Yeah.
term of art.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if it's in
It's
here.
not defined, which is disappointing.
Yeah, I
Right.
didn't find
I was
it
hoping
either.
it'd be
It's
defined.
not in the code anywhere except that clause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could describe to you what a heavy service is.
Yeah. I don't know.
It appears in quite a few codes. I just looked it up. It's a very common term that appears in nearly every other code, which tells me that it's probably something that came out of a state law somewhere that specifically describes heavy services.
It could be.
Okay, well,
I don't
how about
know.
this? If Nikhil or Lucas, if you can find a satisfying definition of that somewhere in the state law, then let's leave it in. And if you can't, let's take it out.
Okay, I'll note that.
I agree, Steve. I think that's
Yeah, you should know what it
good
means.
direction.
Well, it gives
Yeah.
the impression with it being in quotations that it clearly must be defined somewhere else. but
Yeah, it
it's
must
not.
be a term of art, as Nikhil says.
I just didn't see a definition.
Okay, I'm sorry, Commissioner Nolis, did you have some others?
Yeah, I had another one. This would be page 32 of 66.
Okay.
And if you go to the middle of the page, number 8 is furniture, furnishings and equipment stores. And related services. Well, it was interesting, and maybe it stays and maybe it doesn't, but if you go down to item I, it says large musical instruments. I guess that would
Harps and pianos?
I didn't know if it belonged there or should it go on the next page, which is page 33, where we have musical instruments, parts, and accessories. I wasn't sure why that would be there. I thought, well, pianos or harps, tubas, cellos, big instruments. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the question is
Do we need
8I,
2 of those or break it up? I'm not sure.
is 8I included in 4? Can't be 4 again.
It would be for general retail, musical instruments, parts and accessories, which is item U.
But
On
this is all
following
in the
page.
same paragraph, and we have an 8 on page 32, and then we have a 4 on page 33.
Yeah, so that might be a numbering issue and a
I'm sorry, nope. We had a
Sorry.
break there on page 32. We went to definitions G. That's
Oh, yeah,
why the
yeah.
number started over again.
Yep.
Oh,
we're
yeah.
okay there.
you're
Yeah,
right,
Got it. Okay.
right. So
So-
I just wondered, is that kind of redundant or is there a reason that we would have it separated out?
And why large musical instruments and not small?
Right, right. And it appears, I mean, I don't know, unless you're renting them, stores engage primarily in selling the following products and related services.
I don't know anywhere locally that rents musical instruments, but
Yeah, I don't,
certainly possible.
There is a piano store in Bryant that just moved there from Oakview.
but would that still be
Oh,
considered
okay.
musical instruments, parts and accessories?
Yeah, I was just trying to think, does the number 8, is there something that's more of a industrial zone aspect to this? And I don't
Yeah.
think so, and at least in this town.
No, it sounds
So-
like regular commercial zone kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's
So-
grouped with, draperies and home furnishings.
But you do have Chisholm's on Bryant Street that does floor coverings.
Well, and that falls under
And
this
that's in the
category.
M1 zone. So
Right, but that, the draperies and the floor coverings, I mean, that all makes sense, but
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I would group all the musical things together.
Yeah.
I think.
That was my thought, but
yeah. Well, how about we take 8I on page 32, drop that out, and
yeah.
say it's included in 4U on page 33.
Can I add a little quick thing real quick?
Please.
So I just noticed on number 8 on page 32, furniture, furnishings, and equipment stores engage primarily in selling the following products and related services, including incidental repair services. If you go to 4 on 33, this is just general retail, stores and shops selling many lines of
Oh, yes,
merchandise.
okay.
So we're kind of talking about two different animals here.
So, but do we still, okay, let's just say it's a repair or a service in a musical instrument service. Do we need the word large? I don't know. That
Doesn't feel right.
sounds like a piano tuner.
Yeah, a piano tuner certainly would fit.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
And maybe I'm nitpicking, but it just, yeah.
and not only
I
that, but it's
questioned it.
large instruments versus just musical instruments. And then,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are parts and accessories that go along with that,
Right.
whether it's wooded or brass, right? So
But they
How
have
about
parts
we
and
just-
accessories in the second one.
Do we allow general retail in the industrial, for example, on Bryan Avenue? I mean, I'm just thinking I would be fine with having musical instruments and musical and incidental repair allowed in either commercial or industrial, but
Yeah, but these are just definitions. They don't refer to zoning district.
but it does have consequence for what we do say in the use tables.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm looking right now here, just out of curiosity.
I don't have my tables in front of me. I'm sorry.
No, I'm looking right now.
Pull my Title 10 folder. I have that draft consolidated table.
I have retail as a permitted use for C1, BP, VMU, M1, MPD, but as an accessory. Let's see about general. There's general retail as a permitted use within the C1 and VMU, but
And
not
the
allowed
furniture-
within the BP, M1, or MPD zoning districts.
Okay,
Unless
but
it's grandfathered in, like Chisholm's.
I mean, those would be non-conforming, yeah. So those could still remain, but you couldn't have a new use come in.
Furniture, furnishings, and equipment stores, or this says, and appliance stores in the table. And that's permitted in C1 and M1, period. The furniture.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
furnishings, and
Furniture,
appliance store.
furnishings, and appliance stores.
oh, so that's probably why it's
That's probably why it's
in that
permitted in
column.
M1, because it's already there.
M1 and yeah, C1. Yep.
Yeah. Well, how about let's at least change 8I to simply say musical instruments, not large.
Yeah.
Because we don't see
Agreed.
small musical instruments anywhere.
Right.
agreed.
The other thing I'm wondering about, both in item 8 on page 32 and item 4 on page 33, it says nothing about repair. Oh, it does on item
Yeah, it
8.
does.
Okay, it does say incidental repair services.
Yep.
Okay,
Commissioner Swift had just read that with the
Yeah,
note of that.
earlier.
Right.
I feel good about that then.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Nolan, you have some more?
I think all I have for the moment. Let somebody else have a stab at it.
Any other changes suggested?
Well, let's see. I have a couple things. Wait a minute here. Just a minor point on page 16 of 66. Most of the time when we refer at the very top under C, it talks about notice to property owners and it references state law, government code, section, I kind of wrote over it, 65091. And there's a subsection A is included. And my feeling is while it's a good idea to reference the government code section, I'm a little less inclined to include the subsection in it because I don't know, that can change and we might not have any way to trigger the associated change in the local code.
Okay.
One way that we have done that in other places is to add the phrase comma as amended.
Okay, okay. Either
Well,
way.
after that, yeah.
And it looked to me like both subsection 3 and subsection 4 had been struck out, and
Right.
4 is correct.
Right. I mean, I would be happy with just saying government code section 65091, because generally you can find it with that kind of a reference, but if either way, or as amended is fine.
Yeah. What do you
Um,
think, commissioners?
If we've done the as amended previous to this one, maybe for consistency,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
continue with that,
Okay, works for me.
make the most sense. I think. Yeah.
okay. Let's see. I turned over the top of my page that I had a question on, so let me find find those. Oh, I did have a question on, so we talk about adult daycare and child daycare center, and then somewhere else we talk about, we have a definition for group homes. And so Lucas, this is more of a state code question. So I guess, I thought when I say group home, I guess I thought I was referring to basically adult daycare, with a certain limit on it, but
It's not the same.
it's not the same. And it sounds like the definition on group homes is per state code differentiation from adult daycare.
It's a separate part of state code. We have a group home in our neighborhood where
So do
they
we.
have, I think the limit is up to 6 clients in the
Yep.
home at any one
Or-
time.
Or
Right.
12 with large daycare, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
limitations regarding, correct. The
so,
number.
okay, I just wasn't clear. I mean, this is probably just for my own self-education. That's what I suspected. I just wasn't sure. There was a differentiation between adult daycare, for example, and group
And
homes.
group homes, yeah. Because group homes aren't necessarily adults. The one in our neighborhood is all teenagers.
Yeah. That, yeah.
But
Okay.
we're all getting an education as we go through this.
Exactly. Just briefly, back to on page 28 of 66. It's at the top, it's a new number of 14. So we have 13 contractor yards and then 14 convenience and liquor stores. Just a small change, because we say, so we're now saying retail store, convenience and liquor store means retail stores which sell alcoholic beverages for off-site consumption and or carry a range of merchandise oriented to convenience and traveler shopping needs. I would just say, I don't like the or and or. They could either sell the alcoholic beverages, pretty much solely as the principal thing, or my preference would be to say something like, and that may also include a range of merchandise rather than the or.
Right. I agree with that.
Are we looking at
That's fine with
convenience?
me. I'm looking at Ojai Liquor, which is right on Ojai Avenue at Topa Topa. And that would describe them perfectly. They sell alcohol, but they also carry a range of convenience items.
Right. It's the or that's weird, because that means they could either sell alcohol or they would still be a liquor store and basically sell only merchandise oriented to convenience and traveler shopping needs.
Well, I'm never completely comfortable with the phrase and/or because it's kind of ambiguous. What do you think, Nikhil?
I mean, you're right. It is ambiguous. I was double checking to see if that language, because a lot of our alcohol is often comes straight from ABC regulations.
Sure.
And so if that and/or exists there, then we probably have to mirror it. Or it doesn't really matter what we do, because oftentimes the ABC kind of controls, for example, if it's on-premises alcohol sales through retail, it requires that the retail business sell more than just alcohol. But I know that they have a series of licenses. So, for example, wine shops often don't sell anything but alcohol. They just sell bottles. So I would hesitate on changing that language till we know it doesn't, that we're not going to be conflicting with anything done by state law.
Agreed. However, if we do say, so if they sell alcoholic beverages for offsite consumption, and that may also include, I mean, that's very
That's
open
then,
to whatever ABC would require,
that then
I would think.
we lose the definition of a convenience store that does not sell alcohol.
Right. And should they be lumped together necessarily? And McKeel, you had mentioned like a wine shop that just sells bottled wine. Does that
A lot of
fall
those.
into this category? Or is that a separate category?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, because
Yeah.
Like I said, they get their first permit from ABC, and
Right.
ABC has very strict rules on-site sales of alcohol in sealed containers. So there's sales for consumption and sales for retail. And so ABC has very specific permits that you can buy alcohol, but not consume it at the location, versus a bar, or even there are some businesses that have an on-site consumption license, like Total Wine will have wine tasting inside their retail. And some places do have that. So I actually don't know I'd have to drill down into their the ABC regs to find that.
Let me throw something out here. I know this has been a point of discussion on more than one occasion, the alcohol piece. And while and versus or seems simple, it's taking away from some of that definition. I almost feel like we're doing deeper dives on some of this stuff. Maybe one of the deeper dives is the focus on alcohol related uses, and focusing in and chiming in on definitions and other areas, and kind of grouping that together. That's something. I mean, we're doing that for other aspects of this in terms of deeper dives. Why not?
Sure.
Why not do that with that?
In fact, it occurs to me that of the stuff I sent you, besides the very simple errata, a number of the questions that I asked, Lucas, are probably appropriate to a deeper dive one place or another.
Yeah, no, you're right. And to a certain degree, I would almost hesitate to striking out generally 3,500 square feet or less in gross floor area, only because that merits a discussion in its own right if we're talking about alcohol uses, convenience stores and liquor stores of the sort. So I would almost say pull back the reins and let's take kind of a bigger picture look at, and kind of dive into each of those sections.
Maybe we'll eventually go back to saying a liquor store is one that may also sell convenience items, and a convenience store sells convenient items but may also sell liquor.
Yeah.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. Separate. They may need to be separated out.
Well, let's leave that paragraph the way it is then, without the strikeout for the moment, and we'll come back to it in a later session.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Is that okay, John, Jake?
Because we could have an entire commission meeting dedicated to
It definitely comes up periodically.
So, and maybe it warrants it. Maybe it warrants a larger discussion about the existing uses we have and the potential uses that may come in. So
clear definitions.
Good. Okay. Let's see, just a few more questions. So back to page 34 now. On the hotel and motel definition, which is at the bottom of the page, it's number 6.
34.
Page,
Mhm.
So the current code does have, let's see, so we say facilities with guest rooms or suites provided with or without kitchen facilities, rented to the general public for transient lodging. And then in parentheses, we have less than, oh, so currently we have less than 30 days and we're just changing that to 1 calendar month. Is that's,
That makes
I was,
sense.
I was just wondering why we even have 30 days in there, but if
It's,
that's currently in there, we're just rounding it out basically.
And the council did change 30 calendar days to 1 calendar month somewhere else in the code.
I thought,
Yeah, I remember us.
for
Short-term rental ordinance.
short-term lodging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
STRs.
Right.
Short-term
Yeah.
rentals, yeah.
But there's nothing to say you couldn't rent a hotel room for 2 months, right? Or is there?
No.
You can rent for 2 months. But the minimums for a short-term rental, which is a separate part of the code, is minimum 30 days. So
Yes.
so you can't do like a weekend in Ojai with a short-term rental. You can only do it through a hotel.
Okay, well, since the current wording and has 30 days, we're just rounding it out. It's fine.
That change was just so that people could do the month of February.
Right. Just a quick question on the next page at the top on household pets.
Yeah, I looked at that too.
So whatever we're saying here, I just wanted to make sure this is consistent with the new animal keeping ordinance, right?
I had that question as well, Kathy.
That birds, cats, dogs, etc., other common household pets are determined by the director. Is that
There is a determination that I can make, but when I do that, it triggers kind of the same thing with the DE where it's a 2 and 2 where
Mhm.
and mind you, this hasn't been vetted through city council officially yet.
The animal keeping stuff has not gone to council?
It has gone once, but it hasn't been
Second reading.
Yeah.
Hasn't been adjudicated by council yet?
No,
correct.
it hasn't come back for second reading yet.
Okay. You know what? I thought it had been adopted, so.
Yeah, no, it hasn't
Okay.
yet, but
Mhm.
that's a good point. I'll make that note.
Please check and make sure it's consistent, right?
Right.
And I just was curious, number 8 on housing cost, what, do you know, Lucas, what does that relate to I mean, what are we,
Where are you
I
at?
didn't know what that related to in terms
Oh,
of.
housing cost, the sum of
Yeah,
actual
in the
monthly
definition of
payments.
housing cost, I
Huh.
didn't really know where else that might be somehow referred to in some other part of the zoning code.
Projected monthly payments
Just
for
curious,
all of the following costs, principal and interest.
By the way, we were talking about alcohol. While Lucas is looking that up, we were looking at alcohol before, and I did a search on the code for wine. It only appears once, and that's in the land use tables for C1 and M1 and those. It was note 7, whatever that was.
yeah, well,
So, but we've got alcohol and wine has alcohol, so it
Yeah.
shouldn't matter.
You know, housing costs could be taken from and derived from the housing element, but I also think it might be within one of the sections that we have built into the code already.
okay.
I think I've
Because,
seen it
I mean,
before. Hold on.
the whole affordable housing thing it's not really tied into this kind of language as far as I know.
No, this would be independent of that.
Yeah. Well,
It's a more general term. It is in fact in the affordable housing area.
Yeah, I'm seeing it within reasonable accommodations, which is 10.2.9.10, and then affordable housing, which is 10.2.703. Let's see
Right.
what that one has.
Okay, well, if it's somehow, integrated into, or important for some other section of the code, fine. It just seemed like
It was out of place.
How's that cost?
I've never come across anything like that, so.
It's a bit unusual, but if there's anything about our code at this point, we continue to find its unusual nature usual, right?
Yes,
We'll
yes.
probably find a bunch
That's
more.
quirky Ojai, right?
Quirky Ojai. There you go.
Let me see if oh, okay, page 42 of 66. New number 16. Proposed project.
Yep.
So we say a proposed project is a proposed new structure or new addition to an existing structure or area of other new site development, or a proposed new use of a parcel, an existing parcel or structure. Does not include the alteration of any portion of an existing structure other than an addition. But I mean, a proposed project is actually a pretty broad term, and it seems like it's more broad than excluding any alteration of any portion of an existing structure. I just wouldn't exclude that from a proposed project, because a proposed project, I think, could be a new use in an existing structure, or it could be an intensification of an existing structure. So,
Or it could be a demolition of a portion of an existing
Yes.
structure and replacement.
Right.
In fact,
Right.
you just did a DE on Topa Topa
right.
that involved some of that.
So I don't know if that's really correct.
Or is a proposed project a broader definition? Or maybe, in the city, it's not used that way. I mean, I'm thinking of like other things that you may have to get permitted that don't have to do it.
It's
What if
anything
it's like
that,
in a commercial zone, they're going to completely redo their parking lot, and they're going to be
it's a
doing
sign,
landscaping and new signage, but it's not a building or an addition.
right,
But
right.
that's kind of how I use it. Maybe that's a layman's term, but yeah, I mean, I would have to every time read that to understand it. Yeah. And know that it was just referring to a new structure, a new addition.
Yeah, I just think it's too limiting. It's almost a proposed project in terms of community or zoning is anything that requires a permit of some sort, basically.
But the phrase proposed project occurs a number of places in Title 10. Maybe we should set that one aside for a deeper dive, but I'm not particularly comfortable that demolition or replacement are not in there anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
a
I think
good
you're right, Steve.
definition will probably come from a more extended debate.
Agreed.
Right. And I'll look through the rest of the code to see, how it is or where it was applied in other areas.
Well, for example, it's in 10.2.1808 environmental assessment, pre-application conference, neighborhood meeting encouraged, findings and decisions. 3 different sections with that title. 4, development allotments, precise plans when required, and the land use tables. So
Okay.
let's mark that one down for an extended discussion at some point.
Yeah, because it's not really a deeper dive per se, but it certainly is. What does that definition look like currently?
Right.
What's the errors there? Where is it applied elsewhere within the code, and how do we solve some of that? Right. I think those are the steps that we'd be looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of places in Title 10.
Sure.
So,
All right, so I'll get rid of the underlined area that's in there. We'll just pull it back
Okay.
for a continued discussion at a later date.
Mm-hmm.
all right.
I think that's all I have, Steve. For now.
Okay. Jake or John, did anything leap out at you?
Not particularly, no.
I didn't have anything on the errata. I mean, clearly the first part of this was all about lighting and all that, but I know we're not focusing on that tonight. That's all part of kind of this little project that I've been working on as far as kind of the electrical stuff. But no, other than that, the errata, no, it's not really my strong point is.
Okay,
So.
one that just occurred to me again, that's sort of odd, I thought, and this is on page 54, paragraph, looks like E, submittal for city approval. It says in a form approved by the city engineer. That's the Public Works Director. And that seems an odd place to have plans, reports, and documents. I would have guessed that would be approved by the director.
What page are we on here?
54.
At the top.
Second paragraph, third paragraph on, it's after 13 and 14, there's an E.
It is related to final parcel maps and track maps, though.
Right. But should it be changed to, because
Is
I
that-
think we use Public Works Director. In other words, it needs to be consistent. Either we call it the city engineer, call him the city engineer or whoever it is in the future, or do we just use the term Public Works Director? Which I think I remember seeing in a couple other places.
So,
Well, let me just check
Yeah.
here.
yeah, the city engineer is actually defined in 10-305,
Okay,
subsection C. But then they also talk about so they define community development director and city engineer.
oh,
So, or actually they just define director. They don't say community development or public works. And so there's two separate things, but it's my understanding that, for example, here, Greg Grant carries both roles of community develop or city public works director and city
engineer, yeah.
And city engineer is actually you need somebody who can approve plans, who has the city engineer certificate.
Okay.
Or engineering certificate to approve plans.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a couple places, and I don't have it right on the top of my head, but going through this, I thought there was, maybe it's in the next section. Our next item, number 3, where I saw reference to the Public Works Director. So I don't know if you use both terms or do you give that person one title, or does it depend on,
Well,
on the subject matter?
It's clear to me the intent was that they be two different people, because in the middle of page 55,
Maybe that's where it's.
there's a section L or H1, and it talks about effective date of the action of the city engineer or director. And it's established early in Title 10 that for Title 10 purposes, director is the CDD.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
so
the city engineer has been separate in previous years.
Just leave it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say leave it. Right now it's merged into one individual, but that's not to say that would be the same 10 years from now.
Right.
Okay.
So.
Oh, on page 59, 106401B, it talks about Small dwellings with a maximum of 640 square feet. I think that number is now 1,200.
Now, that was our old,
640 was
second
the
dwelling
old
unit.
limit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
guest house. Yeah, you're right, Steve.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah,
It's under B, subset B.
under B, next to the last line.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that should be 1,200.
and should it say instead of small dwellings, accessory dwelling units, just to be consistent?
Well, accessory dwelling units is in the line just above
Yeah.
single-family
Oh, yeah,
home
yeah, you're right.
and small dwellings. And the paragraph A on page 59 there. Oh, I didn't list that on my list. I was looking at subparagraph A there. Moderate income or senior citizens at an affordable sales price or rent. Oh, that's okay. There are two tables. One talks about sales price and one talks about rent for affordable. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's in that affordable
That was
article or
okay.
subsection. Yeah.
That kind of jumped out at me, but it's correct.
Okay, this is back to B. F, single-family homes developed on a single parcel of record and dwellings with a maximum of 1,200 square feet rather than small. I mean, isn't that, I don't know, is that necessary to have the word small there? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
59.
What do you
let's
strike
be,
it?
let's be consistent.
Yeah,
You want to take out small.
right. I don't think it's
Well, if you make it a
necessary.
maximum of 1,200, that's actually bigger than some houses single family houses that we have.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't think it's necessary. Yeah.
All right, with everybody, take small out.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, the rest of what I had was real errata that will be caught as it goes through the process, I'm sure. Any more? If not, if we as a group find this text amendment acceptable, then a motion to approve the resolution.
Chair, if I may, just before
Yes.
we move forward, this is a public hearing item, so we do need to open and close public hearing.
And we have been deliberating, which comes after the public hearing.
Yep. Right.
We've been sort of asking questions of
It's
staff.
been a Q&A. Yeah.
So you're right. Okay, then we'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone who wishes to speak or anyone who has written in on this topic, let them speak up now.
I have not received any written communication. Sherry, is there anybody in the queue?
Nobody in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Lucas. Then we'll close the public hearing. Any deliberation on the questions and answers from staff that we need to discuss at this point? And if not, then a motion to approve would be in order. Approving Planning Commission Resolution number 21-03.
Let me ask just one question in
Yes,
regards.
ma'am.
In your proposal, do we need to exclude the items that we said we would discuss further?
I think we could say as amended because we have made.
Oh, as
some
amended.
changes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we that wasn't neglected. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine. Sorry about that.
Some of the amendments we haven't made yet, but some we have.
Right. So as amended, okay. Did you just make the motion, Steve? Or you
No,
just
I
asked
did
it?
not. I called for a motion.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion then. Let me just go back to the front. So I'll make a motion that we approve the draft ordinance to Title 10 as amended.
That being Planning Commission Resolution number 21-03.
Yes, thank you.
I'll second.
Okay. Any
And I know
discussion
staff
of-
has made a good list of all the amendments.
Oh, I've been taking notes.
Okay,
Any
good.
discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Sherry, would you take roll, please?
Quillisi,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes,
Lottis,
Yes,
Trent,
Yes.
Swift.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Terrific. Item 3, a review of Building Appeals Board recommendation for amendments to the code, specifically for items from Title 9. They suggested be moved to Title 10. Lucas, would you take us through that, please?
Yes, absolutely. So this is actually still within the errata discussion that we just had regarding Title 10. But the interesting thing is the Building Appeals Board put together recommendations within their own code, which is Title 9, to look at relocating sections within their title to either the Public Works Code, which is Title, I believe, 7, or looking at moving sections within Title 10, our beloved zoning code. So there were actually two pieces that were discussed, and I believe my notes say it was back in 2018
Right.
by the BAB. And at one point, it was actually discussed by City Council that there were two chapters that would be brought forward and discussed by this body as to its inclusion, how it would be included, what portions would be added, removed. And I have both of those chapters, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, included for discussion. This is a discussion piece. There is no strikeout and underlining at this point. We're talking about the raw information that's currently in the code, and potentially those chapters being punted to Title 10 and what that would potentially look like. Now, there's lots of questions to be asked here, and I open up this for a conversation, a wholehearted conversation as to its incorporation, molding, shaping these chapters, or even not even including portions of or the entire chapter. I think those are all on the table for discussion this evening, and we can go through each of these chapters one by one. There's just two chapters that we're looking at here tonight, and not to say that we're making a decision tonight, but certainly taking kind of a look at each of these and seeing what fits within our title and what doesn't, right? And what's already maybe it's verbatim to some degree in terms of what we're looking at here. So I open it up for discussion. We can talk, if you want, we can break it up into two different pieces. We can talk about Chapter 7 first, which is street improvements, which does seem a little odd, but when you start looking at the subsections, while it talks about public works, it also talks about private projects to a certain degree. So
right.
While it feels like maybe it gets punted to the public works title, there seems to be pieces embedded into here that merit discussion and whether or not those should be included into Title 10.
Commissioner Nolan, please.
All right, well, I'll start us off. I agree that, and I'll start with Chapter 7, the street improvements, that portions of it definitely fall into planning, and portions of it, this is in my opinion, fall under public works. So it may be that it gets split up depending on what the item is. But the reason I'm I agree with a portion of it going into planning is that it's dealing with sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. And in relation to a new projects where somebody's building, and if those amenities are not existing on the site, then the new project and the property owner is required to include those. So okay, I do chair the Complete Streets Committee, and we've been on hiatus this last year. But this came up numerous times, not only in regular planning commission meetings, but also in Complete Streets. And the discussion went like this, and a lot of it has to do with funding as well. So normally the property owner would be required to put those amenities in if they weren't existing, if they're building a new building. But what we find if you do a survey and you go out throughout the city, and this is predominantly in the residential area where you'll find this, although in some commercial as well, you will have a house or a residence with a sidewalk, curb, and gutter, and then on either side are two houses without it. And if those existing houses do not get taken down and essentially rebuilt with the new permit, potentially you're going to have this short little section sidewalk to nowhere for no reason at all. Yep. So the discussion that we had in Complete Streets was that, doesn't it make more sense to identify where in the city it would be best to have sidewalk, curb, and gutter to meet the greater good for everyone? And what we identified was it would be like the primary of roads like Highway 33, Highway 150, Ojai Avenue, Maricopa Highway, and then secondary streets like that connect kind of the north to the south.
The collectors.
The collectors. So it would be like, say, like Montgomery and Signal and Park, for example. They're well used. They have amenities like, say, a park or Sarasota, stores, etc., to get you from Ojai Avenue, let's say, I'm using this for example, to Grand and beyond. But and this is where you're going to have the most vehicle traffic, potentially the most multimodal, people walking and biking, but you're trying to get to amenities in downtown, so to speak. But when you get out to the further neighborhoods, you don't necessarily need a sidewalk, curb, and gutter. So for instance, if you go all the way up, what am I thinking, is that Grandview, Park Airs, into the foothill areas, basically you're only going to have residential traffic for the people that are living there and the occasional guests. So it's safer for walkers and bikers to be in the street and not necessarily have a sidewalk. So anyway, long story short, it makes sense to have it built where you really need it. And the other properties that, let's say, live in the outskirts that don't necessarily need that sidewalk, you could have a fund where everybody pays into it, but then it's concentrated where you do need it on the primary streets and the collectors, etc. So, so that's my reasoning why I think that should go into planning. And it makes sense to me to have that approach. Of course, that's up for a discussion, but why some of it should be there. And then you get into some of this, of course, that starts talking about like a bond for construction or the engineering. That to me would fall, or maintenance would fall more into the public works sections. So that's just my opinion.
Okay, well, to muddy the water a little further, perhaps, I agree with much of what you say, but sidewalks, curbs, and gutters are all objects that you find in the public right-of-way. They don't have to do with planning of projects that we typically work on. It's just kind of assumed that the public works requirements will call for those things. And so my feeling would be that most of this chapter 7, if not all of it, probably in toto belongs over in title 7 somewhere. And we ought to find a place in title 10 to reference it and say, while you're doing this project in whatever zoning area it is, be sure to be mindful of public works requirements at the same time.
On the other hand, of course, this is kind of above and beyond.
Well, that's why we're discussing.
Right. And so, and I do hear exactly what you're saying. Would it fall into planning at some point? For example, the city hired a consultant to do the neighborhood planning, which originally also came out of Complete Streets. We, identified, hey, we need to, there's a reason for looking at neighborhoods differently, and their needs, wants and needs. But would it be wise to actually create a plan that identified where the sidewalk, curb, and gutters would be installed?
Where infill is required.
In planning, but then as you were saying, Steve, then, the bulk of it ends up going into the rest of the document, goes back into Title VII.
That's where the standards would be, I would think.
Yeah.
But the requirement to follow the standards would be very appropriate in Title 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you were talking, I mean, that's what I started thinking about. The really the general plan. I mean, this may be something that we might want to follow up with the general plan consultant as commission comments.
Yeah.
The general plan should be talking about establishing a master plan of sidewalks or pedestrian pathways or something to that effect.
Circulation element.
Yeah, that's, but with particular emphasis on the pedestrian pathways.
Right.
Where do we want hardscape sidewalks? Where do we want maybe DG gravelly? I mean, you can get as detailed as you want, but I would say I don't see any reason why and actually in the general plan, it really would preferably include development of the master plan of sidewalks, meaning the hardscape.
Yeah.
Because that would probably be pretty easily identifiable with all the work that you guys have done on Complete Streets, and it would feed from that.
Yeah.
All
And
that
the neighborhood
input
planning that was done.
Yeah, so once you have a master plan of sidewalks, then you have a reference point for when you require the hardscape sidewalk and when you don't need it.
Right. And whether, it would be, up for discussion and approval, of course, if everyone that was building would pay into the fund or not. That's a whole nother layer. But
right, the funding mechanism. Yeah, and that should also be discussed. That can be part of the implementation plan. But I would be, I think this is really the appropriate time to really be pushing for a master plan of sidewalks, because then if it's a street that's not included on that plan and somebody builds a new house,
they're not required.
Then we would never require the little section of sidewalk for that.
The sidewalk to nowhere.
Yeah. So if you walk up and down Daly Road, for example, which my wife and I do frequently, you'll find there are a lot of lots that have sidewalks and curbs and gutters, and there are a lot of others that have only curbs and gutters and no sidewalks.
Right.
And I suspect that all of those that have no sidewalks were in place before the 2004 iteration of most of Title 10. And I didn't see anything that said they weren't grandfathered. So I'm not sure how detailed we need to get in the general plan, but I think some indication of either in, well, not necessarily in housing, but in the circulation plan, the circulation element, it might say that there are areas of the city more toward the downtown core, less farther away from the downtown core, where sidewalk, curb, and gutter infill would be encouraged if there is new construction or reconstruction, something like that. I'm not sure what
Yeah,
kind of language you're looking for, but I don't know that we want to get too detailed in the general plan.
Well, having a master plan of sidewalks would be very appropriate for the general plan. And it can be, I mean, we don't have that many streets to be talking about. And
Right.
it could definitely be done on a street by, you just have a little map and you can map out all the streets that would be appropriate for hardscape sidewalk, with
Right.
a, you know, heavy blue line or something. But, and actually, Steve, I know exactly what you're talking about on Daly Avenue. And as Kathy was talking about streets, farther away from the downtown where maybe you don't put a sidewalk. I was thinking of Daly, and I find Daly, just as an example, to be somewhat difficult to walk on, because you're walking on the sidewalk
And you're in the
you have to
street.
go out into the street, then you go back onto the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And the cars do go.
We don't bother with
relatively
that. We just
fast.
walk in the street.
So, I mean, that's a street that's an example of probably need for further discussion and community input, because we have, you know, we have handicapped people, we have parents with strollers. You know, I'd like to get their feedback from those kinds of communities in terms of what they feel where they like to see sidewalks. And that's part of the outreach for.
How about we give the
general
Complete
plan.
Streets Committee an ask of looking at sidewalks, curbs, and gutters in a little more detail as we all consider the general plan update.
Yes, thank you for that segue, because there is a wonderful piece that we have on the agenda tonight for an update, and that is the general plan update. And I think I'm loving the conversation, because I can see this transforming at the March 10th workshop. So
Right. I also
and
was
we
going to
really
mention
are
that,
talking here about, do these two chapters of Title IX belong in Title 10 or somewhere else?
yeah, so we're talking. That's kind of what I want to get back to focus on. I agree. There is this bigger piece to what we're talking about here, and I appreciate the conversation. But
and actually, I agree with Steve. I think in particular the street improvements is very appropriate to go into Title VII.
That's really what the Public Works Director is responsible for specifying.
Right. The plan, the master plan, or the reference to the master plan would then be appropriate for Title 10. That's kind of the split that I see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And how about Chapter 13 then? That is Transportation Demand Management.
well, that definitely comes up in our some of our projects where we have to have a traffic study, or there's CEQA, you know, how many parking spaces, and you know, all of that. So I'm thinking yes.
I am too. And I have definitely seen other zoning codes where the transportation demand management section is included, and it would be its own section. And I did look at the zoning code, and earlier today we have what have we got? Anyway, it seemed like there was something else we talk about.
Well, we have a transportation corridor overlay in the zoning code already.
TCO, right?
That talks about just the areas right along the two state highways inside.
Right, that was rediscovered not too long ago. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. No, it was my feeling, just having read through these few pages, blessedly few pages, that Chapter 7 belonged primarily in Title 7, but with citations to it in Title 10 somewhere.
Right. Agreed.
But at Chapter 13, the Transportation Demand Management really belongs in Title 10 because it's a planning element.
Agreed.
And it has to do with the impact of projects on transportation.
And congestion and air quality. Yep,
Agreed.
yep.
Seems to make sense.
Well, if we agree that as a preliminary look at these, that we would suggest moving one to Title 7, but reference it in Title 10, move the other to Title 10, and then we can come back at a later date and actually look at the details of these chapters, particularly chapter 13, and see if we can figure out where to shoehorn it into Title 10, which could cause a lot of renumbering, or we could just throw it at the end. That makes it easier. And then look at the details of each of the sections within this and go forward. That seem like a reasonable approach?
Very good.
Very good.
Totally agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more discussion, not getting down in, as John has noted on occasion, I tend to run down rabbit holes, and I shouldn't either.
I don't say that. I don't say
I
that.
thought he was talking about me.
It was talking about me on another occasion, and it was exactly right.
We all do sometimes, and myself included.
But let's take it as a
We're just so
homework
excited.
assignment to go back through these and look in a little more detail at them, particularly chapter 13, and see if there's something that you would like to add or change or delete in those, because it's only 4 or 5 pages in each one. Should be pretty straightforward. Lucas, do you feel like we've had sufficient discussion for your purposes?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's good. My spidey sense had 7 potentially being punted elsewhere, and 13 seems to be appropriate to live in Title 10. So yeah,
Okay,
makes sense.
well, great.
That's good enough for us to start kind of whittling through it.
Let's move on to agenda item 4, director decisions. Any questions there? I noted the Ojai Valley Inn and Spa, they wanted to do tree removal and replacement. And I was just curious, since this, I didn't see specifically what it was. Was this relating to the DE that is the first one under the heading director's exemptions?
Yes.
Is that the same case?
Yes. So they're intertwined. One is connected to the other.
And I was just kind of curious what kind of trees, because I know that a few years ago, they took out all those diseased eucalyptus trees along Country Club Drive.
So there's 2, if I recall correctly, there are 2 oak trees that are being removed, and they're replacing them with 2 trees in kind at the same location. I don't remember exactly where they were at, but they're very close to the Jimmy's Pub's patio area that's being done there. So the other thing is they're planning on actually planting a fairly large, this is kind of in discussions right now, a fairly large oak tree on that site as well. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of potentially 96-inch box tree. So they're looking to go pretty big.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not final.
That would require some heavy services, business services to get that in place.
Yeah, it's not finalized yet, so I can't say that it's inked, but that's the discussion that I'm having with them right now.
Okay. Any other questions
They're being very
for staff
aggressive about it, which is good.
on tree permits or DEs or home occupation permits?
Our oak trees. That's good.
Okay, hearing no other questions, let's move on to agenda item number 5, tentative agendas for future meetings. Lucas, talk to us.
Let me open it up here real quick.
Sure.
Oh, geez. Well, I can just tell you there was an item that we had initially anticipated putting on for tonight's meeting, which was a lot line adjustment. At the 11th hour, there was some changes that were made to that lot line adjustment, which I didn't feel comfortable taking to this full commission without vetting out what those changes were. So I'm actually having a conversation with the applicant tomorrow afternoon to talk through those, as well as the Public Works Director, City Engineer, Greg Grant, to talk through some of those components. It just seems odd that they're making a change at the 11th hour for a lot line adjustment, and the change is very unusual. So I'm just trying to understand what's going on there, and just know that that'll be coming to this full commission in the very near future.
I do recall about 3 weeks ago, you sent us an email saying there were several projects in the hopper. So I guess we'll throw those into meetings as they arise. Could we work through some of this Title IX stuff at the next meeting, which is March 3rd?
Yeah, I think we could. I think it'll be a discussion piece. Maybe that's where we start looking at some areas of the code where it could squeeze into, or if it ends up becoming its own article. I mean, it's kind of open in terms of how that ends up fitting in. You're talking about chapter 13 here.
The chapter 13, yeah. It feels to me like it should be an article within Title 10, Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Just not clear where yet.
Perhaps
Right.
it may make sense to bring it back as another discussion item, because I do know Lucas and I have discussed there are quite a few projects coming down the pipeline, which may impact our calendar. Projects that'll require a public hearing, and probably will require applicants to be there and questions asked of applicants. So,
well, and I think it's probably appropriate that we have a more detailed discussion item on chapter 13 before we get to the point of writing up a resolution for a text amendment to put it into Title 10.
Right.
I noticed that you do have on March 3rd and 17th, you still have Title 10. And I'm just curious, do you know offhand how many Planning Commission resolutions we have in fact approved recommending text amendments in Title 10? Three so far.
Yeah, this is the fourth tonight.
Oh, this is the fourth tonight. Okay.
Yeah, the idea is to have all of those merged into one kind of mega ordinance with the errata. So it's
Okay.
one fell swoop. And I've got staff working on. So one of the pieces that Nikhil had reminded me of is when this goes to council. For instance, we have all those charts where we sent that all forward. Those charts have to be in perfect, pristine order when they get shipped off to the code writers. Right now, they're kind of oddly placed because of the word formatting. And I don't know if I mentioned this to the commission before, but we were able to actually find the original Excel documents from 2004 when this all went forward as a major code rewrite. So we're going back and we're looking at those and plugging those changes that have been recommended by this commission forward to City Council. So we're not rewriting it. We're actually just going in but it's taking us some time here. But just know that those are all going forward at the same time.
Seems like a lot of tedious documentation work.
It is. It's busy work. It's that good work that we talk about, right? It's the good work.
At what point do you think we ought to come back to the consolidated land use table and rewriting those sections of chapter 2 that would have to be rewritten if we have a single table?
Oh, we're talking about consolidating all of the tables. We had that conversation back.
We did have that conversation with a draft consolidated table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see a reason why we couldn't reopen that up for discussion. Now that we have two brand new commissioners that have not been a part of that discussion. So it may be important to kind of rehash where we were at, because we had gotten to a point, and I do recall that I was coming back with some discussion pieces. I think outdoor dining was one of them,
Right.
for a larger discussion. So
Yep.
there's no time like the present to start dusting that off from almost a year ago, actually. Now I'm thinking
Well,
about it.
let's do that in one of the next two meetings, when you can get to it then.
Okay.
Because that seems like if we're going to have a mega update of Title 10 with all this errata, and we've had a few deep dives, but not many yet,
Mhm.
that consolidated land use table might be a good thing to throw in the hopper.
Yeah, and it's organization. I know that we have two commissioners there haven't had an opportunity to see it, but its organization is really succinct. It's really nice how I've seen it in other cities where it's had that level of consistency, which allows for ease of understanding. So you're not looking at confusing and conflicting use references or even use titles throughout from one section to the other. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
Maybe you could provide that consolidated table again as part of the packet for one of the next two meetings. I know I have a soft copy, so I know you have a soft copy.
Oh yeah.
And then we can give all the commissioners a chance to look at it.
Okay. And just so you know, there's several other projects. I know I've sent this commission an email updating the commission on those items. There's even been additional applications that have come in recently, concept and otherwise, that will be before this commission within the next month or two. You can expect that. So just know that there's definitely going to be some interesting projects coming forward.
I do recall in past years, and I'm sure Commissioner Nolan will remember, I'm not sure if it was before Commissioner Lottis came on the commission, that we had some presentations, concept reviews on the bowling alley property,
Right.
and also on that approximately 1 acre property that is at the corner of, I think it's Bald and Ojai Avenue, across the street from Sea Fresh.
Oh, yes.
There was a concept review that had retail and office and residential all on that 1 acre plot. And it
Right.
would have required some rezoning or something to allow any residences in that C1 zone. But I was just wondering if either of those is in your hopper again now. Okay, well, gentlemen, you'll find those interesting if they ever come back.
Now they were doing some work at the bowling alley, with maybe just cleaning it up. I saw some trucks over there.
Unfortunately, there's
After
there's
20
nothing.
years, they still have the discouraged chain link fence all around it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing to report on that one.
Okay. Well, the last thing that we would have on the agenda would be general comments from the director or commission members. Anyone have anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about tonight? Lucas?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Sure.
The one thing that I do have is I sent an email off last week and expect to see more email blasts as the date gets closer, but it's a save the date. March 10th is our first kind of a series of workshops for the general plan update. Tell your friends, bring some coffee. Let's enjoy 6 to 8 p.m. Discussion piece, and it'll break off into smaller groups as well. That's kind of the idea, where it'll be kind of
just like this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They've got a format where you can break off into little groups, and within those groups you can have those discussions, and the idea is to take those discussions back to the full group at the end.
Excellent.
So it's going to be I'm certainly looking forward to it. This is my jam. This is what I love to do. So Looking forward to the March 10th. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending on how you look at it, it will be virtual just because of where we're at with this pandemic. Virtual seems to be the safest route,
Yeah,
at least at this
okay.
point.
And that's the Wednesday evening between our two meetings.
Yep, that seemed to be the sweet spot. That seemed to
Okay.
be the sweet
Yeah.
spot. It was intentional.
How about the commission members? Anything else you'd like to bring up?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
I'm good, thank you.
I think for the next agenda, depending on the pleasure of the city council, we might reinsert another item called city council liaison remarks. We have
I
had
noticed
that
that
on our
too.
agenda in the past, but not always.
Okay.
And to my knowledge, we have no city council member liaising with us tonight. So the question is moot for tonight.
All right.
But if there is no other business before the commission at the moment, then at 7:20 or 7:32 p.m., I declare us adjourned as a commission. Thank you all very much, and I compliment you on the detail that you are and the time that you are taking to look at some of this stuff. It seems tedious, it seems petty at times, but we're talking about the law of the city, and it's important that we get these things right. So thank you all very much, and good night.
Thank
Good night.
you.